get to, we will get to at the next meeting, or we'll get back to you individually. We are planning on having these meetings every single month, and the idea is to give a very brief progress report from each of the partner projects for City for Champions, and also a very brief report from the city and from the county. We have legal representation up here with us to answer any of those kinds of questions, and so we're going to be very brief with what we're giving you in terms of a progress report, and there may be some progress reports that are essentially to say, we've made no progress this month, because there's a lot going on, and this is kind of a long-term process that we are in. So the idea is for every partner project to be able to give that report to you very briefly, and then it will be opened up for Q&A. And so that's kind of the idea. And with that, I would like to introduce Stephanie Finley. She will be our moderator for this afternoon. And again, I just want to thank all of you for being here.
Good afternoon. We are delighted that it's a full room, because this issue, this endeavor, has certainly created quite a community conversation. And we're delighted with that. Pro, con, curious, whatever you come here with today, we're delighted that it's creating such a great conversation in our community. I do want to mention something that might please you, and that is that there are coffee and cookies in the back for you. So please feel free to go to the back and get that. Also, we are going to do this in 3 phases. We want to make sure that we get all the questions answered. We want to make sure we get all the feedback we need, or you need us to have in this process. So we're going to do it in 3 phases. We'll do the project update, then we'll do questions and answers, and then we'll do feedback before the end of our meeting today. And so just as a reminder, we have been in about a 7-month process of public meetings, public conversations, and lots of great discourse on this issue. And so this just continues that as we move along. And so I want to be, and we want to be, respectful of people who are new to the conversation, who have questions for this group. And so we will be looking to those first to get your questions answered before we go to the feedback phase of this. So if I seem a little tough, it's because I'm going to make sure that we hear from the new voices in the audience. With that, we're going to start with our project updaters. And the first one up is Bob Cope.
Thank you, Stephanie. What I'm going to do is really just take a look at the Regional Tourism Act, how we got to where we are today, and where we are today, and the steps going forward. There's a lot of information. I'm going to go very quickly. I have 10 minutes. I'm going to try to do that in even less than that. But I'll be here individually for questions, and of course, we can answer questions as part of this process if necessary. And this is going to be interesting too. Okay. So with the Regional Tourism Act, 2 concepts that you want to keep in mind as we go through this. 2 main ones. One is to add significant tourist projects to the state of Colorado, and they must be unique and extraordinary. I'll talk about that. I'll mention that as I go through this. The unique and extraordinary is not there to heap praises on these, even though these are great projects. It's to protect the integrity of the income stream that these projects generate. The state wants to be sure that this revenue will continue to flow without competing projects coming and taking it. Then the next concept is that the state intends to finance these projects in part with net new state sales tax revenue generated by these projects. Revenue that's paid for only by visitors from out of state who would not be coming here otherwise. So the venues, which the venue supporters will talk about later, but of course the United States Olympic Museum, the one and only, Colorado Sports and Events Center, Olympic-themed sports venue, unique and extraordinary, UCCS Sports Medicine Performance Center, best-in-class medical provider for elite athletes and Paralympians, wounded warriors, Mayo Clinic of sorts. and the United States Air Force Academy, the one and only. So once you've identified your 4 projects, then you have to take a look at what's called the TIF zone under the Act. The TIF zone is approximately maybe 2/3 of the city limits. It encompasses about 90% of the hotel, retail, and restaurant venues. The reason being is that the way that you're going to capture the net new state sales tax revenue is from the overnight stays, the meals, and the retail spending, and the other attractions that these net new visitors to the state would visit. One interesting thing is that you see one dot that's located outside the zone. That's the Air Force Academy Visitor Center. And people ask, how can that be outside the zone? I think that helps illustrate how this works. What we're trying to capture is, again, the overnight stay, the meals, and the other spending that they do. We're not trying to capture sales tax that would be payable upon an Air Force Academy t-shirt or mug or that sort of thing. So once you've identified the zone and the projects, then you have to take a look at how many net new visitors you're going to get. There are reams and reams of information behind this data, but the number in the bottom right-hand corner, 513,000 per year, those are net new visitors to these 4 venues, visitors that would have not come to the state of Colorado if not for these projects. Once you know that you're going to have 513,000 new visitors, you want to know how much they're going to spend. So you take a look at the research, Longwoods International, kind of the research Bible for tourism, and you find out that the average person spends $72 a day. The average stay is about 4.5 days. Won't spend time here. This is just to let you know that once this analysis was done, 30-year cash flows were done for each of the projects, and 30-year sales tax projections were done for each of the projects. These are the totals from that previous slide. Talk about the upper left-hand, the first 2 numbers that are in highlighted there. The $3.7 billion, what that is that is the base over 30 years of the existing sales tax in that zone, that dark blue line area that I showed earlier. And that's over 30 years. So it's estimated there's about $100 million per year coming in that zone now, and that base is established and is being calculated right now by the state of Colorado to come up with the exact amount. But it's important to know that the state will continue to receive that base throughout the full 30 years. The next highlighted number is the $755 million. That is the growth in the base, the natural growth in the base. So in addition to the $100 million now, you are going to have new businesses that form in the zone that are not related to City for Champions. You're going to have existing businesses in the zone that are not related to City for Champions. And that revenue will continue to flow to the state. Then you go over to the right hand on the top line still, and you add the next 4 numbers. Those are the total sales tax generated by these 4 venues, which is about $160 million over 30 years. And you add that to the base, the growth in the base, and you get about $921 million. Drop down to the next line, you see the $121.5 million. That is the net new. That is the sales tax generated by those 513,000 new visitors that would not come to the state if it were not for these 4 venues. You divide the $121 million by the 921, which is the growth in the base, and the total increase by these 4 venues, you get 13.08%. On December 16th, the state of Colorado approved the application for the City of Colorado Springs to receive 13.08% of the net new sales tax in that blue area that I identified over 30 years. And the entire purpose of that calculation is to zero in on just the net new spending by out-of-state tourists on those venues. So the next slide shows a couple of numbers. It shows the sales tax revenue for El Paso County and the City of Colorado Springs from those 513,000 net new visitors based on the county's 1-cent general fund sales tax and the city's 2-cent general fund sales tax. So you have additional income streams of about $41 million to the county and about $83 million for City of Colorado Springs. Next slide, a lot of information here. I'll go over the highlights. The top 2/3 shows a breakdown of the cost of all the projects, about $250 million. Talk about some of the important financing streams here, and one would be the red line at the bottom, which is the bond proceeds from the state RTA financing. So the $120 million estimated revenue stream would be bonded to approximately $50 million to pay a portion of the cost. Then, as proposed, the city and county then would mimic what the state has done on the RTA style TIF, generating, again, from the previous page, about $80 million and $41 million that could be bonded into amounts of about $32 million and $18 million. And those bond proceeds would go just to the Colorado Sports and Events Center. Then the green line above, a major source of funding will be philanthropic or private sector giving. It's important to know that on this finance plan that a significant amount of due diligence has been done. A lot more will be done. In the end, investment bankers and bond investors, the people that write the checks, are going to do an extreme amount of due diligence on these projects. In the event that the sales tax revenue would not be sufficient to service these bonds, the bondholders would assume all of the risk, not the taxpayers. Also important to understand that the 4 operating entities that will be operating these 4 venues will have the responsibility for operating these projects, and if there are operating shortfalls, those shortfalls will be the obligation of those 4 entities, not the taxpayer. Significant economic impacts. You see some of those, 1.2 million visitors to Colorado Springs, 513 net new, 4.2 billion in net retail sales, 320 million in additional tax revenue over 30 years. And again, projects funded with net new state sales tax revenue paid by out-of-state visitors. That's only 13% of the growth in that zone. 87% of that increment will continue to flow to the city, the county, and the state. In addition, City for Champions creates 5,100 jobs, approximately 2,800 of those permanent. Because of the job creation and other benefits, there is what is being called a fiscal bonus to the city. I like to look at it as an insurance. Just from the out-of-town visitors, the net new state sales tax revenue on our half-cent sales tax that's not included, and the spending of those 5,100 new employed people, you generate about $86 million additional net new revenue for the city, funds that would not come to the city if not for those projects. And next page, on El Paso County, same kind of an analysis, which I believe that Nicola will talk about. There's also PPRTA funding that will be generated by these new visitors, so significant revenue flowing to the area from PPRTA. So net economic impacts, $192 million in net new local sales tax revenue over 30 years. That's after the TIF financing. This is $6.4 million annually. $132 million of that will go to the city of Colorado Springs, $60 million to El Paso County. Again, this is sales tax revenue, local tax revenue, over and above, after the TIF financing. This is revenue that the city and county will never see without City for Champions. That will result in about $6.5 billion increase to GMP over 30 years. Again, growth we won't see without these projects. So we'll just close by saying that City for Champions is an investment in the community that grows the economy, expands the tax base. City for Champions does not reduce the general fund, it grows the general fund. Funding that can be used to address core city services, capital improvements, stormwater. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Next, we'd like to call up Nicola Sapp, El Paso County Budget Officer.
Good afternoon, Nicola Sapp, County Budget Officer. I'm really thrilled with this turnout. I just am really disappointed that not all of you show up to the budget hearings that we have at the county, because I would love to see this kind of turnout at our budget hearings. But I have a much briefer slide than Mr. Cope. I do highlight some of the main key numbers and points, but just want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at the county, what we've seen so far, and then kind of some of our next steps, if you will. So, and I apologize, it's kind of hard to see those screens in back, but, and I really only have 3 slides. So just speaking to what has occurred to date, there has been an extensive process as it relates to the application to the state of Colorado for the regional tourism funding or grant award, if you will. And that was awarded on December 16th, 2013. So just over 2 months ago, that award. And what effectively, when the State of Colorado Economic Development Commission went through their extensive analysis and their review of this, what they did determine was that these projects are unique and extraordinary, which is defined, which is requested as part of the RTA requirements. They also recognized that these projects are financially viable economic growth opportunities, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. And ultimately what that results in is identifying a contribution of $120 million or 13% of new state revenue to support these projects. So what that means to us as citizens of El Paso County, the City of Colorado Springs, to this region, is that ultimately the state has determined these are viable projects, so they are willing to contribute $120 million of their state sales and use tax dollars towards these projects locally. That's effectively what that means. So let's talk a little bit about bringing it into perspective. And Bob spoke to these numbers, but I like to, I love Bob's spreadsheets, so much information, but I'm really trying to throw it out here in 4 different numbers. And what you see here is the Economic Development Commission, their approved projections, and some of what we want to make sure is clearly understood here is that the state sales tax generated from the C4C projects, they are looking at over $921 million. I want to clarify, this is not a tax increase. This is not new taxes. This is what they believe that these C4C projects will pull into our local economy as a result of building these projects and effectively from outside tourist dollars. So this is not a local tax increase that we are looking at here. This is generated from tourist dollars from people visiting these venues and ultimately visiting our region. Now, to put it again into perspective, the state recognizes that's the full economic impact, the $921 million, but they, to be conservative for them and their revenue, they are only contributing or providing an increment, if you will, of 13% or $120 million, and that's the number that you've heard kicked around. And this is a 30-year impact. The projected new visitors to the region, and this is not over 30 years, this is an annual amount projected in year 5, is just under 1.2 million. Additional visitors that EPS's study and economic development, again, the Economic Development Commission in the state, approved projections that would result in an additional 1.2 million visitors to the region to visit these 4 projects, and then they're basing their increment to be conservative for their own projections on the 513,000. One of the things I want to speak to as well before I go on to the last slide is that there has been some discussion that the city and the county would be bonding these dollars. There would be a concern of spending into general fund dollars. That is not the way the RTA is designed. The RTA is designed to create additional new tax revenue to our local community, if you will, our region, as a result of these projects, not as a result of actually bringing in or us increasing taxes, if you will, or bonding or having any general fund impact. What they are stating is this is performance-based, if you will. So if these projects and those sales and use tax amounts do not materialize, it's performance-based. So we are only being asked to contribute to the extent that they actually perform based on what the state projects that they are going to perform. But having said that, Those are very large projections. $921 million is a very significant number as it relates to a 30-year impact. So El Paso County, being conservative as we always are, and moving forward, our next steps are we are actually discussing with a third-party economic analyst to look at what would the full economic impacts be to the region as a result of these projects. And let me just say this. You could say, well, the previous slide just showed what we think that's going to be. But the RTA had very strict requirements in terms of it allowed the analysis to include certain pieces, certain economic impacts, but left out other economic impacts. So what the county is going to do is we are going to go through a full vetting process, partnering with City Council, partnering with the Mayor's office to go through and look at what the full economic projected impacts will be to our region. Now, just as a side note, EPS, Economic Planning Systems, was the economic analyst, if you will, that performed the analysis for the state of Colorado. They also happen to be El Paso County's economic analyst. So given that, they have actually asked to conflict off of this since they've already done the analysis for the state, and they have recommended to us another analyst that will be equally as conservative and will go through this analysis for us. And so currently, El Paso County, we are in discussions with this other analyst, and we are looking at defining scope and terms of what will be identified and what we'll be looking at. Then we will be having meetings with the Mayor's office, with City Council, and really what we want to hear through these town halls, this is excellent. We're hoping to get some really great questions and feedback from the community so that we can look at what some of the misinformation is out there, what some of the concerns are of this community, so that we can go back and have that analyst look at that and vet that through the process, and to be able to answer all of the questions that are brought forward today. So with that, that really does end my presentation. Thank you very much, and I do look forward to seeing you all at our budget presentations. We have those posted on our website. Thank you.
I think it's important to note all of the elected officials who are in the room today. So I'm going to ask you all to stand, and thank you for your service to our community. So if you'd stand up, we'd be grateful for that. Don't be shy. Come on. Let's give them a hand for the work they do on your behalf. And speaking of recovering elected officials, Governor Dick Celeste next to present on the, or have you not recovered?
I haven't.
Okay, I understand that, sir.
Can I do it from here?
Are you all good with that?
Can you see me all right? The truth is I can't see you very well because I was at the eye doctor just before I got here. And so you're all a blur to me, and I apologize. I don't want to treat you that way. Stephanie, I'm going to be a bad boy and ask questions out of order. How many of you watched the fabulous ice dancers last night in the Olympics? Okay. How many of you have watched the Olympics sometime during the past week to see what's going on in Sochi? Okay. That's why this is so exciting, folks. That's why I personally have been devoted for the last year and a half giving my time to help us create a world-class Olympic Museum and Hall of Fame here in Colorado Springs that would celebrate both the history of the Olympic and Paralympic movements and the achievement of those athletes over time. It is an extraordinary brand, and we should not take it for granted. So let me just give you an update. Where are we right now? We've completed a feasibility study. We have a board for the museum that is hard at work. 3 major tasks right now in process. The first is we have to, to operate the museum, we have to, by requirement of the EDC, have a legal agreement between the United States Olympic Committee and the U.S. Olympic Museum, an understanding that will allow us to use content and be the only museum in the nation to use that content for the future of the museum. that process began, but as you know, most of the USOC office is now in Sochi, including their lawyer, who, by the way, doesn't have credentials to go to any of the games. She's just there if there's a problem. Consequently, she's working on drafts of the Memorandum of Understanding. Our hope is that within the next 30 to 60 days, we will have a signed agreement between the USOC and the museum board. It is one of the requirements of the EDC. It is certainly an essential ingredient for us to be able to secure additional major funding. Second thing is the EDC agreed with what we identified as our ambition in the first place, which is to create a world-class venue, an iconic building, something that people will come to. And in fact, by the way, it would have to be the most accessible building ever because it's going to celebrate the Paralympics and not just the Olympics. So it's going to be a challenge for a design architect, the challenge for the builders. It's going to be a challenge for us to put this together right. We hope to have our RFQs for design architect, for contractors on the street in the next 30 to 60 days. There is incredible interest. In this community, certainly every major contractor in the community has discovered my email address or my phone number and has called. But there's interest across the country now. Architects nationally calling architects locally saying, can we team up to propose on this project? Our hope is to have those RFQs on the street in the next 30 to 60 days so that we get a sense of who's interested, what they're prepared to bring to the table in order for this to be a successful project. And then the third and most important ingredient is going to be to raise somewhere between $50 and $60 million of private money that is the core for financing the U.S. Olympic Museum and its setting in downtown Colorado Springs. We have begun with some very small amounts of risk capital so that we can get started. We have our first proposal in front of a major, what I call a major gift proposal in front of a foundation currently, and we expect to have most of the major asks in motion in the next 60 days. This is something that's going to take the initial work 60 to 120 days, and then much of the gifts, these are going to be gifts in the order of anything from $1 million to $5 million to $20 million. These will be gifts that will almost certainly be given over a 3-year period. But I would hope that when we get together, let's say 120 days from now, I could give you some very specific indications of who has committed to this project and what way they will be helping to support it. So that's an update. I hope I've saved some time for those who want to ask questions down the line. You've answered my questions for me. I'll look forward to answering yours. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. I noticed that Harris Calafanos just came in the room. USA Wrestling. You all heard the controversy early on at the beginning of the last year. Harris was instrumental in helping get wrestling back into the Olympics. And so I know that embarrasses you, but I can't help but note what a good job you did. That was a major victory, so thank you. Now, I want to remind everyone that we have note cards for the shy. So if you would rather not come to the mic and ask your question, you have an outlet. But I'm going to go one step further, and we're going to be really innovative. And if you want to text me a question, text me your question. I'm at 216-4148. We did this at another meeting last year, and it worked out really well. 216-4148. Now let me introduce one of my colleagues at UCCS, a longtime member of this community. In fact, born and raised here, Dr. Brian Burnett, to talk about UCCS and the Sports Medicine and Performance Center.
Thank you, Stephanie. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll start over.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Stephanie. I'll start where Dick did because I do teach classes at UCCS as well. How many of you remember in this room the old Cragmore campus of the University of Colorado? Raise your hand. Okay, got some long-timers here. Well, your state university here has come a long way, and we were delighted to be a part of the City for Champions proposal. We crossed 10,000 students on campus for the first time in our 49-year history this year. We'll cross 11,000 students next year, and if you think about the economic impact of what that means to our community, we think we're a viable piece and very much appreciate being part of the City for Champions proposal. So let me give you a brief update. So on behalf of Chancellor Shockley, we want to give you an update of where we're at. We've been working on this project for quite some time. The Chancellor has publicly indicated before City Council, and that we've been working on this initiative while this whole process has been going because our campus is planning to grow. For those of you in the room who do not know, we've been labeled the Growth Campus by the Regents of the University of Colorado. We're part of 58,000 students, all four campuses the University of Colorado serve between Boulder, Denver, Aurora, and Colorado Springs. The university has completed a feasibility study for our piece of the City for Champions for two potential sites, both adjacent to the Lane Center for Academic Health Sciences, which is on North Nevada, across from University Village Shopping Center, right by Lowe's there, if you've seen it. And ironically, we cut the ribbon on that building tomorrow. And we're celebrating the opening of the Lane Center for Academic Health Sciences, which will house the Branch Medical School, the first one in the state of Colorado. And thank you for that. We appreciate a lot of support. And honestly, we wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't a community partner called the Memorial Health System lease that was done between the city and the University of Colorado Health. That's providing the majority of the funding for the Branch Medical School. Back to the City for Champions project. One site can hold a 72,000 square foot building and the other can hold a 77,000 square foot building. So we're evaluating right now these two different sites of where the City for Champions. But either site would be connected with a sky bridge or pedestrian bridge from the current Lane Center you can see on Nevada that we open tomorrow. The preliminary cost estimate for our project is between $27 and $31 million. Depending on internal finishes and elements and final decisions about user requirements. At present, the university has a request on the streets for documented quotes with a closing date for submittals of February 28th, and this is a public solicitation for services and is on the state's bids website as well as the University of Colorado's procurement site. This request for qualifications seeks an outside consultant to help the university examine the potential tenants and elements to knit together with our faculty and students to meet the desired elements and required elements, quite frankly, in the Regional Tourism Act application and agreement. Additionally, the university last week received a recommendation from the Colorado General Assembly's Capital Development Committee to approve this project for spending authority in the state's long bill. We expect this project to be included in the state budget bill that will go to the governor sometime later this spring. This gives the university and our Board of Regents the authority to proceed with the project once the funding sources are identified, vetted, and approved by our treasurer, the CU president, and our Board of Regents. Finally, to reiterate an important point the Chancellor has said publicly and is now in writing to both our county commissioners and our city council, UCCS does not intend to request any city or county sales tax increment for this project. We don't intend to ask for local tax dollars. Our funding sources are the state sales tax increment that has been discussed earlier, awarded by the Economic Development Commission, leases from our potential not-for-profit and potentially for-profit tenants, and some measure of philanthropy that we do with our buildings. Thus, UCCS continues to make progress on its part of the approved City for Champions projects, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time. I'd just like to finish with one thing. For us, for those of you in the room that know your history of Colorado Springs, this project really brings us back to full circle because our original building was the Cragmore Sanitarium. And that was built to bring medical tourism to the Pikes Peak region in 1916. So here we are in the next century, leveraging the assets of the Olympic Committee, the national governing bodies of Olympic sport, and this Olympic Training Center that's just right over here to leverage those assets to bring medical tourism to our community. It's a natural partnership. It's coming full circle for the university, and I appreciate your time and interest in our project today. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Carlos Cruz Gonzalez, and he's the Director of Installations. When you welcome him, let's thank him for all that the Air Force Academy does for this region. So, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and I should thank you for all the support and that you provide us up there at the Academy. Certainly an exciting time for us. You know, this is our 60th anniversary year. In April this year, we celebrate the 60th anniversary of the founding of the Academy. And so it's in that vein, this gives us a great opportunity to share with the city not only our tremendous development, our heritage, but it also gives us an opportunity to work with you and develop even bigger and closer heritage as we move to the future. And we become your northern gateway to the Pikes Peak region. I'm here on behalf of General Johnson, our superintendent, and just to let you know what we've been working on since the project was approved in December. In short, most like the other venues, we've been conducting our own internal feasibility assessment. You know, the application spoke to a visitor center at our stadium. The superintendent asked us to look at a couple other options just to ensure that we select the location for our visitor center and our gateway where we can maximize exposure to not only visitors that travel to the Academy specifically, but also to all that traffic that flows north-south on I-25. And so last week, we presented the draft assessment to General Johnson, and well received. We've got a few more questions we need to answer, and we're working out over the next month or so to finalize it. And once we have that assessment complete, then we begin, like any good federal institution, a significant project development and approval process that we have to follow through our own Air Force headquarters back in Washington. And then in terms of financing, part of that project development process will include our thoughts and our recommendations to Headquarters Air Force on how we can finance this project. And much like Governor Celeste indicated and ECCS, we will be relying mostly on private financing for this project. We see we have a number of avenues we can follow, from everything our graduates who are interested in always supporting our academy all the way across to third-party financing arrangements with other parties. And we will be exploring all those alternatives over the next several months. So with that, again, I thank you for the opportunity to provide the update, and I welcome all of you to come visit us up at the Air Force Academy. We're always open for business.
And next to speak about the Colorado Sports and Event Center is Doug Price, the CEO of the CVB.
Good afternoon, everyone. Back on July the 8th, the City of Colorado Springs submitted the application to the state that included the 4 components. And the 4th component to brief you on this afternoon is the Colorado Sports and Event Center. Originally, that project as submitted was going to be the home, if you will, of the Sky Sox. And once we submitted that application, we began to get some feedback, and we certainly listened to the community and listened to elected officials that said perhaps there is a better way to go about putting together a downtown sports and event center that could leave the Sky Sox out on the east side, leave them in their current home, and do something that would really leverage a strength of Colorado Springs, and that is working with the USOC and the national governing bodies that are already here to what we came up with the term was Olympicize the event. So what we did was really transform the outdoor 10,000 seat stadium to a 10,000 seat multi-purpose stadium that could accommodate long fields for soccer and rugby and lacrosse and things like that. And adjacent to that was to build a 3,000-seat indoor stadium, arena, if you will, that could accommodate up to 6 basketball courts, be able to be very flexible, to be able to do wrestling and boxing and all sorts of things, and have 3,000 permanent seats inside this particular venue. So we have really just begun to start, seeking the expertise of the United States Olympic Committee, the 23 local national governing bodies that are here, our local sports corporation, and other sporting teams and organizations to help establish what this Colorado Sports and Events Center will really even look like. One of the beauties that we have here is that we have local people who travel not only the country, but they travel the world and get to see venues that are best in class. And they have been very open in saying, if we have something like this here, we would really like to lend you our expertise of what we've seen so that those athletes that train here in Colorado Springs would also get the opportunity to compete here in Colorado Springs. So at this juncture, it is still very early on. We are not nearly as far along as what you've heard the other 3 people talk about in their particular project. And we're in the input stage. We're taking feedback from people as to how to best design these. And from a financing standpoint, we're going to be looking at options of ways that we can put this together that'll be both in keeping with what we've told the state we're going to do, as well as making sure that we're good stewards of the funds here in Colorado Springs. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Stephanie.
So let me remind everybody that we'll go into the question and answer phase right now, and then we'll take feedback from everybody. And I want to manage the time well, and we promise to get everybody out of here at 6 o'clock. And so I'll be watching the clock and making sure we have time for that feedback. The first question, and I have been getting questions in, the first one I got was, does this outfit make me look fat? Now, I'll take that question and say, no, it doesn't. You look terrific. So thank you. Okay, so as you work your, and that was really something somebody texted me. I'm not kidding. So I'm glad to see there's humor in the audience. We need to lighten up a little. So the first question I have from a text, and then make your way to the microphone. If you have questions, please feel free to come up. The first question I have is it says, Steph, the question that needs to be answered to put citizens at ease is this. Should the return on investment not materialize as the private, and they underscored private, investors anticipate, ensure the citizens that they will never be asked to fill the financial gap? Can this be written into the proposal? And so, Mr. Green, would you like to come talk about that? And then we'll take your question up next.
To answer that, I'm not sure if I'm on. To answer that question, first of all, there is no intention that I'm aware of from the City Council, the Mayor's Office, or the Board of County Commissioners to incur any type of, or to place on the ballot any type of tax increase as it relates to the financing of these 4 venues. You've heard from Mr. Celeste, you've heard from Mr. Burnett, and also you've heard from Mr. Gonzalez that there is no request for public assistance or public funding for that venue. The only venue in which it is being contemplated is the Sports and Events Complex. The Sports and Events Complex, the funding from the city and the county, if it is approved by the Board of County Commissioners and the City Council with support from the Mayor's Office, the only way this is approved is based upon the third-party assessment that this is economically viable to do so. After it is approved by the Council and the Board of County Commissioners, we would then move forward with a performance-based process. Only the funds that are received based upon the performance of these 4 venues will be used to offset the financial responsibilities that the city or the county would have. If the performance is not there, The city and the county do not pay. It is the responsibility and the liability rest with the bondholders who would invest in such securities that would be issued. For some reason, if there is financial liability or exposure associated with that, the intent is for the Board of County Commissioners and the City Council not to be liable. And it's more than intent. They can write this into the documents. They can state what their intent is. However, this City Council, this Board of County Commissioners, and the Mayor of Colorado Springs cannot encumber future elected bodies. They can state their intent all day long. It is their intent to never be responsible for the financial liability. However, we do have to be compliant with the Tabor Amendment, and the Tabor Amendment clearly states you cannot encumber future elected bodies.
Okay, and this is not a random citizen who just got up to answer the question. This is Jeff Green, the county administrator. Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you all for being here. It's very important that we build this dialogue. It's going to take quite a while. This is the first time, and Amy said we're going to do this monthly, and in some ways this may take more than months. Let me just say this, and let me be very clear here. There will be no tax increase associated with City for Champions, period, on my watch. And there will be no risk to the taxpayers of the city or county on my watch. The financing contemplated here is exactly the same as was just approved by City Council for Copper Ridge. Exactly the same financing the City Council approved for the vineyards and for Ivywild, if you're familiar with that project. Exactly the same kind of financing that was approved by a previous council for University Village. I think what's really important is where the rubber meets the road. On University Village, as you may know, that project has defaulted on its bonds. First the B bonds and more recently the A bonds. And even though the bondholders have to look to that project to recover, they cannot look to the city or the county. We do not want City for Champions to fall to a similar fate. So it's going to be essential that we have a thorough vetting of the economics for each one of these individual venues. It's going to take time and a lot of people looking deeply into this. I have said repeatedly, I support City for Champions in concept, along with City Council, I hope, subject to the economics making sense. We're not there yet, folks. We've got a lot of work to do here, and you can help us. So I just hope that will resonate. You'll tell your friends and neighbors that I'm not going to support any kind of a tax increase for this, any kind of risk to the taxpayers.
I noticed that there are a lot of people standing up. There are seats throughout here, and I would encourage those of you who have empty seats beside you, raise your hand so people can come sit there. And then we have 4 seats up here. I don't think it's harmful if people come up and sit on the sides. Is that okay, Madam Commissioner and Mr. Mayor? Okay, so we'd love for you to have a seat. We're going to be here long enough for you to want that seat. So please come on up and get that. And Commissioner Lathan reminds us that there are cookies and coffee in the back. Okay, your question.
Thank you all for being here and for giving us this opportunity to ask some questions. How do you see the City for Champions affecting the rest of the city, financially, economically?
Okay. Governor?
Let me just, I apologize, I'm a newbie in Colorado Springs. I've only been here 12 or 13 years, and I early on decided to stay. We bought our home 2 years after we arrived, even though we had a beautiful house from Colorado College. My previous experience was in Cleveland, Ohio, where I grew up, and when I was governor of Ohio and working with the city of Cleveland to develop the Rock and Roll Museum and Hall of Fame. I've watched that very closely over the last 25 years. And it has become the signature for tourism in Cleveland, Ohio. They get about 460,000 visitors a year, 80% of them from out of state. What's interesting, and this goes to your question, if you arrive at the airport today, you will see guitars on the wall to point people in the direction of the Rock and Roll Museum. If you go to the top the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, the chocolate that they put on your pillow is shaped like guitars because of the Rock and Roll Museum and Hall of Fame. It has become a signature for the community. To me, what is most significant about this is that it builds on 2 extraordinary and unique strengths this community has. That is, The first being the Air Force Academy, about to celebrate 60 years, but the other is the presence of the U.S. Olympic heart and soul, let's say, headquarters Olympic Training Center. That is mobile. It's not, it's like we've seen factories leave. We could see them leave. You put a museum here, you keep the brand here. And that's, I can't emphasize enough the value of that brand. Top viewed, top 10 television events across any period of time are all Olympic events. We want people broadcasting prior to the Olympics from the boardroom at the museum looking out at the mountain saying, this is coming to you live from Colorado Springs, the home of the U.S. Olympic Museum and Hall of Fame. We want to bring not just 350,000, that's the estimate, which I think is pretty conservative by our feasibility study folks, but probably 400 to 450,000 out-of-state visitors. I think this is transformative. It is extraordinary. What happens on the health front is also extraordinary. Anyway, I should stop because we have a lot of questions. But
I'm going to ask Dr. Burnett to answer that too, though, as it relates to the university.
Well, I would just say that the opportunity to bring high-performance athletes and have them treated here, especially with the work we're about to do, setting up the Branch Medical School, the Anschutz School of Medicine, a world-class facility just up the street in Aurora, is also transformative. It leverages the brand that Dick's talking about the Olympic presence here, we already have the Elite Triathlon Academy at UCCS. We're getting ready to expand that. The meeting I have Friday with Olympic officials that just got returned from Sochi. So you can think about the strengths that the university has, what we've done with the Bethel School of Nursing and Health Sciences since it was merged with UCCS in 1997, and you think about this branch campus opening in 2016, all this health piece comes together full circle where we could become an area of excellence in the United States, if not internationally, around treating Olympic athletes, Paralympic athletes, and wounded warriors who we serve here in this community today. So we think that there's a natural tie between these projects, and we're excited about developing our piece. I don't know what's wrong with my microphone.
As impressive looking as these mics are, I think that we need to have people come up to the mic when they answer the question, because the last thing we want to do is annoy all of you. So let's do it that way. Go ahead. What's your question?
Hello. My question concerns an elephant in the room that I haven't heard discussed in the cost of this elephant at any of these gatherings. I am a property owner adjoining the heart of this City for Champions project. I adjoin 25 Chimino Drive, which is the site of a coal gasification plant from early in the last century and before, from the 1890s. This coal gasification plant left significant toxic waste in the area. I have had reason to test the soil in the area that will be disturbed by the construction of the City for Champions program. I have not heard any discussions of the cost of cleaning up the contaminants. Who would be entrusted? Who could we trust to do this in a safe way that would not contaminate the area further? I'd just like to list the contaminants that were found in quantities and concentrations hundreds of times beyond safe limits, what the chief toxicologist of the state of Colorado has called a public health hazard. Here are
let me stop you just for a minute. You have a long line and a lot of people here, so
I'll just read a few
yeah,
of them
just read a
then,
few
very
if you would.
quickly.
Okay.
Okay, I will.
And then let's have your question.
Benzopyrene, benzofluoranthene, dibenzia, hyanthracene, benzoyl anthracene, indinol anthracene, benzoyl aranthene, chrysene, fluoranthene, pyrene, fluorine, naphthalene.
Okay, I think that's good.
xanthine,
I think that's
anthracene.
good. And Governor Celeste would like to answer it, and then I know Bob. And I know, and then let me just say that I've heard this brought up at least 4 public meetings, so you'll find comfort in knowing that conversation is ongoing.
Good.
Kat, number one, that any construction is going to have to take care in the first instance in terms of what are the environmental challenges with the site. The preliminary environmental work, which is south of your site and east of your site, I think, to some degree, doesn't perhaps have the same challenges. But in any event, that's going to be a cost of getting this done and done right. So that'll be built into it.
Okay.
That's
Okay?
a pledge. We're going to clean that area up safely.
Bob, do you want to speak to that as well?
Yes, as Governor Celeste said, there is a site within the existing downtown urban renewal area, the southwest downtown urban renewal area. With any commercial real estate development, there will be an environmental assessment done, and that was done previously, and that contamination was identified. There are phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 types reports that are routine with these types of projects. Once that was identified, the building that sat on that site actually was demolished, and it was done in accordance with the environmental assessment and in accordance with all the environmental regulations. Going forward...
I'm afraid there is some dispute about that last statement.
Ma'am, are you the party to the suit of City of Colorado Springs over this matter?
I am the president of the Smoke Brush Foundation.
Okay, and
Yes.
you are in litigation with the City of Colorado Springs over this matter, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I just think that's fair, full disclosure, but going forward, clearly there'll be full environmental studies done, and you're welcome to be part of that process, I'm sure.
Oh, please, I would like to be on that
Okay,
commission.
thank you very much for your question. Thank you, Bob. I'm going to ask all the panelists to turn off your mics, and they're going to bring 2 mics up here for us to use, and in the meantime, if you'll come here to answer, that would be great. Sir, what is your question?
On the tail end of Kat's. The issue that I have is not the surface, but we're starting to find plumes underground. So we're looking at some pretty extensive monitoring wells that are going to need to be put in the area, because as I've been studying more and more about plumes, you can't control them. And you don't know how deep they are, you don't know, and they often go with water, so they contaminate water. So I'm just curious, where would I go to learn about who is going to be in charge of putting in monitoring wells, not only in our, I mean, I already have the proof here of the monitoring wells with the chemicals, but my fear is actually it goes much further, and the way that water, you can't control water. So how do I keep abreast of something that serious?
Well, again, I guess I'll speak up.
I was going to say, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for your concern. Before there can be any development at all in this downtown area, there's going to have to be a full range of environmental studies by independent experts, and I would trust that that would be a public process.
Do you mean like a Walsh report?
That's
Do
above
you know
my-
what a Walsh report is?
That specifically is above my pay grade, but I know this much. There won't be any development. We're not prepared here, I don't think, to get into specifics, but I can say this, that I will ask as the mayor of the city, along with you, that we have thorough environmental analysis of the site for both the museum and this sports and
Yeah,
events.
and you did that. You did that for the people that were next door to us. And they put together a 250-page, it's a management work plan for demolition, and it's actually quite awesome. And when I was promised it was going to be followed, I was looked in the eye and told that they were going to follow this, and I felt very good, just like I want to believe you right now. But I can show you that they didn't follow the plan, and then in the process of them not following the plan, I learned that plume contamination is a huge issue. So I just don't know how do I keep abreast of this as it's going? Because I love everything that you're doing up here is awesome. I love what you're selling, and I want to believe. But there's stuff going on underground, and could you put somebody on just the monitoring? Just the wells? I mean, just so we could find out what's going on underneath that whole area?
I think if I could offer this, I would think we're going to get you together with Dave Lethbridge, our Public Works Director, just in general terms,
Right.
because it'd be our Public Works Department that would have engineers who would be conversant on this kind of a matter. And as you all know, on the Dave Lethbridge, and Bob, give Bob Cope your contact information, if you would, this gentleman right here, and we'll get you in touch with the Public Works folks, just in general terms as to what processes do we go through. Now, let's be honest about this. We have a pending litigation here by the lady who just spoke. And so we can't get in a lot of detail because we have litigation going here. But I will tell you this factually, to my knowledge, the city of Colorado Springs hired a licensed vendor to demolish that former gas ops building. We did not do it ourselves. Now, there may be some issues there in terms of their performance. I don't.
And so, may I interrupt just for a moment, because...
We're not here to debate. Now, I just want to offer that be happy to have you sit down with our public works people and talk in more depth about, just in general, how does the city obtain environmental reports before we take any kind of an action. And so let's do that as a next step, and hopefully that'll help.
I would love that.
Okay. Bob, you're in.
Okay.
And just remember that these are monthly meetings, so I encourage you to take the mayor up on that. Okay, I'm going to go to our text questions. Has any budget been discussed for artwork for these projects, especially the Hall of Fame? How will artists be selected?
Well, I think that the Hall of Fame, if you look at the numbers, actually, about half of the total, so roughly 25 million out of 55 million is for exhibits of all sorts. Now, much of that is going to be interactive. This is going to be a museum where you experience the engagement with the Olympic values and the Olympic athletes. But I am sure there will be artistic presentations as part of this, and that'll be the responsibility of the executive director of the museum and the staff. And my guess is that the Olympic, the USOC, when we negotiate this memorandum of understanding, will reserve some voice in our choice of exhibits and look as well.
Great, thank you. And then one more. Will the decision not to relocate the Sky Sox impact the relationship between the Sky Sox and the Rockies? Mr. Mayor?
Well, I'd like to speak to that. And initially, I was approached by the ownership of the Sky Sox and the ownership of the Rockies. This is well before City for Champions was conceived. I've been mayor not quite 3 years. I was approached maybe 4 or 5 months into becoming mayor by both the Sky Sox and the Rockies. I was asked if we could take a look at building a stadium for them. And since then, they've apparently changed their interest. And we've also listened to the voices of the community. And so the stadium is now designed. It is going to be a long field, more for soccer and track and Olympic sports. It doesn't mean to say you couldn't accommodate baseball there, but it would not be ideal. So I hope it doesn't jeopardize our relationship with the Sky Sox. They're a valued asset here. I'm just telling you frankly, I didn't call them, they called me. Okay, folks, I'm not in that business. My job is police and fire, honestly. That's what I'm supposed to be doing around here. And I got a call from Tony Ensler, the general manager of the Sky Sox, and Doug Elmore, one of the owners, and some folks from the Rockies. So anyway, that's what happened there. And I think in the end, everything will work out for the best for everybody.
Great. Mr. Murray.
In the end, I don't even have to announce myself. I've done extensive research on this entire process, and you failed in several arenas. But two of the most critical pieces for all of us, first of all, are the 4 venues. Why are there 4 venues, and what really ties them all together? And the question very specifically is, are they severable? As we discuss this process, can we build 1 or none or 3? First of all, has the EDC said that there's a process for severability? The second thing that's really critical in all the numbers you've given us is Mr. Cope, on December 9th, submitted a whole series of new numbers that you made secret through a non-disclosure agreement with the City Council. I expect the city to release those numbers in transparency to the rest of these folks, because they can see exactly what these numbers say. They say you're building a soccer stadium. They're saying you're going to put 6,600 people at each one of these events. They're showing a number of people coming from out of state to use this facility that's almost impossible. And the EDC has never had a third-party analysis. So the 2 questions, are you going to release the real numbers, and is it severable? Thank you.
Mr. Murray, Mr. Murray, you might want to recheck your math, or check with Mr. Cope, or look at Pam Zubek's blog and his response to your comments. You're assuming that every event that's held in this Sports Event Center happens for 1 day. That's not factually correct. Now, you wouldn't know that looking at the numbers. That's why the two of you guys want to sit down and have a cup of coffee. You may still not be comfortable with it, but I think you'll find, let me finish, sir, please. I think you'll find that the numbers are different than what you think. Now, as to why the 4 venues, I was approached a little over a year ago by Bill Hibble of El Pomar Foundation and Pam Shockley of UCCS. I'd had conversations with Mike Goulden, the superintendent of the Air Force Academy, and also Steve Garland representing Anschutz Foundation. And they told me about this Regional Tourism Act the state had that offered a state sales tax rebate. It's a rebate of taxes we're paying the state for these types of venues. And they asked if I would support it in general, if they could put a package together. I said, God bless you people. Finally, somebody around here is going to try to create something that's positive. You have to ask them why they came up with 4 venues. I didn't really get in the middle of that, to be candid with you. I just said, ultimately, it'll be a decision that a city council will have to make if we're going to use any increment financing, and the bondholders who would buy the bonds would have to prove that. So you can certainly have that conversation with them. I'm proud of the people that took the energy and the time to come forward with something positive. And I would say to all you folks, whether or not City for Champions happens, bring us some positive ideas, for God's sakes. Bring us some ideas on how to get this economy going. Would you please? We need help.
And wait a moment. No, it's not a debate. Please, just a moment. I'd like to answer your question. Sir, I'm going to get there if you'll allow that, please. I'd like to turn to our attorneys about the severability. Well, the best thing would be to come up here and speak. Which one of you?
What's the question?
The severability.
Oh, severability. Severability. Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. Amy Folsom, County Attorney. The short answer to your question is that we as legal staff have received firm direction that each of these projects should be severable from the others. So what is in the process of being drafted right now is the agreement with the EDC, the initial agreement outlining the generalities of what needs to be met, and within that document we are intending to make very, very clear that these projects are severable.
Could you speak in the mic, please?
I'm sorry. Is he going to release the numbers of the December 9th that he gave? I would like the release of the numbers that he gave to the EDC on December 9th.
Mr. Murray, are you referring to the confidential performance for each of the 4 venues?
You called it confidential. I got a copy of it through Cora.
Well, first of all, the State Economic Development Commission originally at least agreed to keep those confidential. And let's talk about why. Let's take the UCCS project, for example. And Doctor, you might want to speak to this more so than I should as to what your concerns are as to that information getting out before you have contractors bid. Could you speak to that? Because I think that as an example, I think you probably need to stand here.
Well, it's a waste of anybody's time. I will make that document available to anybody who wants to see it. Thank you.
Cool. Yes, sir.
My name is John Edward Hawk. I've been a community resident for almost 40 years. I'm a humble teacher. I worked for District 11 for 26 years. And these are questions from my heart, and I hope you're listening to this. I teach American government, and I teach economics at 3 high schools. I'm semi-retired. And the behavior I'm seeing with the C4C project, although it's very flashy, very nice, I would describe as asymmetrical behavior, unethical and incomplete information about what this project is really about. And my questions to you, the panel, with all due respect are, Cat Tudor, what are the real costs of cleaning up that contaminated soil down there? It's not 1 block, it's 5 city blocks, it's extensive. What's it really going to cost the city to do that? That's the number 1 cost I'd like to know answered. Second, okay, under what I say asymmetric or asymmetric behavior, unethical behavior, what is the cost of the interest on this project? Nowhere have I seen even a 5% figure of what 5% on a bonding over 30 years for $250 million would cost. I figured it out. It's $125 million additional cost for this project. Okay, I would like to know more about that. Secondly, we say that the tax increment funding is covering 2/3 of the city, and yet we're told that we, the taxpayers, are not going to pay for this. Hello, I shop at businesses all over the community that will be included in that 2/3 area. So I will be, as a resident, paying for C4C, which I object to, okay? Another point, okay? There's a limit of 1.5% growth rate in the tax increment. That's awfully low. Why is it so low? Why is it not an average of the last 5 to 7 years, maybe like 5, 6%, so that all the extra money over 1.5% is not taken from the general fund and does not go into C4C?
Sir, in fairness to our panelists, I think they should be able to answer each question without having to remember it, and it's going to take time to repeat it again. So let's go, how many more do you have?
I just have about 3 more.
Well, we have a lot of people, so let's give me your top 2 questions, and then if we have time at the end, we'll take your other questions.
Okay, the other question is, why in any common sense, economic, political, or otherwise, in a participatory democracy, would there be any non-disclosure agreement about who is going to own the buildings downtown, whether it be the museum or otherwise? Why are we not being told the fact that there are 3 other Olympic museums in the United States with venues already?
Okay, let's stop you there and get the answer to that question.
Can I start with that question? Is this on now?
You might want to scoot your chair here and do this.
Let me start with 3 other museums. They are not real Olympic museums. You go
They are
visit.
Olympic museums.
Listen to me. Atlanta has what they call an Olympic museum to celebrate the Olympics that were held in Atlanta. Lake Placid has an Olympic museum to celebrate the Winter Olympics that were held in Lake Placid. Salt Lake City has an Olympic. None of them are what we're going to have here, which is an agreement with the USOC to celebrate the movement, to celebrate the Olympics from our participation to today, to have the Hall of Fame for the athletes, to be able to have access to all of their digitized video so that we can have interactive exhibits. There will be nothing like what you see in Atlanta or Salt Lake City or Lake Placid. Believe me about that. So that's number one. I might say I resent the fact that you're talking about unethical behavior because I've never tried to keep something from people or anything else in this process. And I respect Cat Tudor personally. I believe that wherever we build, we're going to be deeply concerned about doing it in an environmentally responsible way. I want to say something about this notion that we have to bond $250 million worth of construction. No. We're going to, 50 to 60 million of what we do in the museum will be privately paid for. It won't be built with bonds. Okay. When you go to shop in wherever you shop and pay your sales tax, that's not the tax money that's coming into this tax increment financing. And I think that's what's important to realize. The state is estimating this based on net new out-of-state visitors. And they've pushed that number way down. I mean, compared to the people who've done the evaluation for our museum, they believe that the state figures are low. In the end, the state will make a decision around that. But that's
buying something in Colorado Springs.
Because they're going to look at the incremental sales over time, given the discounts that they've already provided. I mean, look, this is something we should be celebrating. I really, as a school teacher, you should be celebrating because it generates new resources that aren't there today, and it's only out of those new resources that tax increment dollars will be made available to service that portion of the debt. Those are my comments.
Last thing I would like to say real quickly.
Sir, one moment, please, because there are a lot of people. I need to gauge something in managing time. How many of you would like to provide feedback? How much time do we need to allow? So if you're going to provide feedback, let's see a show of hands. Okay, that's helpful to know. And before you continue, Dr. Burnett, will you talk about why the university has to keep some of that in a non-disclosure?
Sure. Well, we issued a request for interest in potential private, for-profit, and not-for-profit partners to come with our faculty and be part of the Sports Medicine and Performance Center. And right now, those are proprietary negotiations, and if that information gets out, it becomes a competitive issue, and it limits our ability to get the best deal we can for the university, for this community, and for the project. So at the appropriate time, those will be vetted, but at this time, I can't release those.
Ownership of the buildings, we should own it if we're paying for it.
All of our buildings are owned by the Regents of the University of Colorado, which are in the state constitution because we're a state university. So all of our buildings are publicly owned.
Okay, and sir, we'd be very happy to sit down with you and answer all your other questions. We appreciate your civic mindedness, we truly do. And for that, you should be applauded. For your statement about unethical, that's unfortunate. So,
How I feel.
well, okay. We'll take you as the last question, then I'm going to go to feedback, and then Mayor Bach, I'll wrap it up with something that I know is important to you. So go ahead.
My name is Raven Martinez, and I wanted to first say that I am bringing something positive up here, and that is that I am a citizen of Colorado Springs. I'm an involved citizen of Colorado Springs. I am updated, and I am keeping track of what's going on. I think where you may think that's negative simply because we disagree with what you want, that's actually very, very good positive that you have very involved citizens who are very educated and can bring things to the table. And what we're bringing to the table, many of us, is something that is very positive. The positivity of trying to keep this city from ending in a doomsday.
And what's your question for us?
Okay, well, one other thing I would like to say real quick, too, is with the information, because I've heard a lot being said about, we can maybe sit down and have a cup of tea, or, we'll send you an email about that. In regards to everybody's questions, is there any way then that instead of simply sending a private message to only that one person, a private answer, that those answers that have been publicly asked can also be publicly answered?
That's a wonderful question, and we appreciate that a lot. We have a website where we will be posting questions, where we'll be receiving questions, and that's cityforchampions.com.org. .com. And questions can flow through there. Keep in mind, we have these monthly public meetings as well. And the reason why we might say that about let's have a conversation, let's get together about the contamination, or the mayor informs me that that is west of this, of where the construction would take place. Let's have a legitimate, productive conversation about that, and not have it out in this until we come up with solutions for it. And so what you're asking is, will there be an outlet for questions? Absolutely. And for the answers.
I was just making that as a remark, because I just noticed that as I was standing there, because I have actually a copy of the same soil report that they was talking about. And so that is something actually that a lot of citizens I have spoke to actually do have information on and would like to actually know that information.
Great.
And so, yeah, that would be.
And I know Bob Koch's going to handle that with your contact information.
Okay, and then so one of my questions then
is. Okay, and hang on just 2 seconds. The mayor is going to speak to that.
Raven, thank you for being here. A couple things. One is, as Stephanie said, the contaminated site is on the west side of the railroad tracks. It is in a location where the intention would be to build a parking garage. So it's going to be essential to get that figured out. I think over these coming months, as we have more and more of these meetings, we're going to have more than one meeting a month ultimately. There's going to be a group of you who want to dive deeply into the finances. I see one right back there, my good friend Jack Lumber, who is not in favor of this project. And I'm not with you yet, but Jack, but we may get together on that. The point is that we have so much work to do, and this is really just the beginning of it. I myself am asking, how can we be sure that that site can be remediated safely and at a cost that works within the overall picture? Keep in mind this, it's hard to kind of grasp unless you're around this every day. How's this downtown stadium and event center going to get built? People are going to have to buy bonds that are going to be sold. Okay, investors are going to have to purchase bonds from either a district or an authority. And to the gentleman's question about ownership, fair question. I don't know. We have to figure that out together. How should this sports and event center be owned? It's not going to be owned by the city, I'll tell you that. We're not going to take liability for it. It's not appropriate. So we can look at best practice, Denver, Coors Field, or Sports Authority Field. They have sports authorities up there that actually own those assets. So I think we're keeping notes here. We're videotaping this, and I think you're raising some important questions, as did the gentleman before you. So as we get deeper into this, we'll begin to answer more questions. What I meant about having a cup of coffee is that one gentleman is, I can tell, deeply interested in the whole area of environment
and environmental protection. I think that deserves a much more thorough conversation than maybe some other folks want to have. So please keep coming to these meetings, and don't even wait for the monthly meeting. I'm happy to get an email from you if things come up where you are looking for answers, and we'll begin to add those to the mix.
I do email a lot, though, and often don't get responses to many city council, city employees, and so forth. But anyways, what I was going to ask, first off, was you guys have continually said that on December 16th that the EDC actually approved the RTA. That's not quite correct. If it's my understanding that that's not quite correct, the final approval, you guys still have to go have a meeting on March 18th, correct? And the final approval will happen after that. From the documents that I requested from EDC, there has not been a final approval of this project. That is what I was told by EDC. The ones you are saying are the ones that approved it.
Okay, on March 16th, City for Champions is due to make a progress report to the State Economic Development Commission and the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. We will do that. We will indicate what has happened thus far. We're well into the discussion on governance for this advisory board. I've asked President of Council Keith King and County Commission Chair Dennis Heisey to co-chair this group with me so that we have 3 people at a senior elected level. We know we need to have 4 of the venues also have to have representatives, and we hope to add 8 citizens plus or minus to that. So we'll give a progress report to the state on March 16th. That's not an approval deadline. We are required by April 16th to submit to the state a resolution. It's really a contract, but it's really, they're calling it a resolution that spells out what the state approved and what we agree to. And the attorneys are working on that now. Both city and county attorneys are working on that document. We'll be discussing that with the county commissioners and city council over the next month. And I'm told that I'm going to be the person that has to sign that. I'm going to do that only after we have a thorough discussion with council and the commissioners. Hopefully we can get a consensus there. And what that will do is just spell out the basic tenets of the agreement with the state, including, importantly, severability of the 4 projects.
So essentially what you currently have is a handshake, a verbal handshake of agreement, because nothing has actually been, the contract has not been at this time wrote and signed by both the parties. Is that correct? I mean, that's what you just stated.
Well, we
you have
that.
a handshake at this time.
We address that, please. Thank you.
The EDC formally approved our application on December 6th. The resolution will be a documentation of the conditions that go along with that approval, but it has been approved.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to put one more question out there, and then we're going to feedback. And then if we have time for questions after everybody gets their feedback, we'll do that as well.
Real quick, I'm sorry, just real quick on that last.
But I want to be fair to everyone, so real quickly, please.
Okay, you said that there's not going to be any cost to the general fund, is that correct? Or has there been so to this date?
You have one question per person through this. Of course there's a cost to the general fund. Bob Cope is an employee of the city government, and I have committed Bob Cope's time. So we are making that level of commitment. What I said earlier, and I'll say again, is I will not support any kind of a tax increase or a fee, however it's disguised, for City for Champions, okay? And that if the city's going to borrow any money for this project, which I do not believe will happen, but if the city were to need to borrow money for this purpose, I would ask City Council to have the voters to decide that. Okay? So there's a cost to the general fund because I got staff involved. I don't think that's a big number. The City Council on March 11th, 2013, Merv Bennett was part of that council that unanimously approved on March 11th, 2013.
It was actually March 26th, and there was 2 councilmen that were
Thank you.
council members that were gone.
I do. I have to call you more often on that. So whenever, March 13, City Council approved us going forward with the planning for this and allocated $75,000 as the city's share into a fund to hire professional consultants on that. So that's we've spent $75,000 there. We're spending Bob Cope's salary, a little bit of my secretaries, and I guess some of my time. But other than that, no. And that's where we are.
All right, thank you.
And let me speak to that as well from the county's perspective in terms of cost that have been incurred. Absolutely right. We have employees that are working on this and looking at this in their time. They are county employees, and their time is going into this. It is an investment that we've been asked to look at. We are looking for the return on that investment and what that will do for the taxpayers, and so there's no question that there are those kinds of soft costs. The mayor referred to the $75,000 which went to the application. The county contributed $75,000 as well. That came out of the county's Economic Development Fund. That fund is where people donate money in order to get a tax exemption from in various ways to enterprise zones and businesses throughout the area. And that is a pool of money that's collected, and it can only be used then, this donated money, to be used for economic development purposes. It's used for things like the Balloon Classic. You can probably tell me the other thing. There's, I think, the Parade of Lights and things like that. It's restricted money donated to the county for the use of economic development projects. It was out of that fund that we used the money for the application as a partner in the application, not a co-applicant, but a partner in the application, as did other entities, and so that's what has come from the county.
Thank you. The last question I have in the question phase is, this is really exciting. My question is, how can we help? How can we get involved? How can we be an active, helpful voice? And so, go right ahead and clap. I like that. We'll give you the softball question, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I'm going to volunteer Jack Lundberg to be on the Finance Committee. Well, we got to work through this, folks. I don't know myself. The real lightning rod is I think is the Sports and Events Center. Air Force Academy is not going to be taking any city or county sales tax increment, are you, sir? So that's not an issue. Nor are you, Doctor, at UCCS. And Governor's going to raise most of the money for his museum on his own, privately. Now, he'll need infrastructure, which means utilities coming to the site and streets and hopefully a bridge over the railroad tracks and a parking garage, which would take some local TIF money. But I think there's several ways to be involved. Please keep coming to these meetings and send us questions ahead of this meeting so we can be better prepared. I wish I would have asked Dave Lethbridge to be here, our Public Works Director, because he could perhaps go with that gentleman out in the hall and they could have a deeper conversation. So it would help us, I think, if you could take the time, and Stephanie, I think you can tell everybody again how to do that. Get us your questions before we come to this time every month. And as we get further, I would submit that we ought to break into some smaller discussion groups of various types. And I think every question is fair as long as it has good intent. The whole purpose of this is to get this economy turned around. Honestly. I mean, it may not be the best idea. I don't know yet, myself. I just know this. I get people every day telling me they're hurting, that they're out of work, they can't find jobs. We've got young people leaving our city. And I see this as one way, not all by itself, because I agree these are secondary jobs. These are not high-paying manufacturing jobs by any means. But the catalytic effect of what this could do is encouraging to me, if it makes economic sense. And we still have to determine that. So I think any way we can do that would be better. If you've got thoughts on what kind of a working group you'd want to be involved in, whether it's the financial modeling, whether it's looking at the environmental issues, whether it's getting into a discussion about, well, what should this stadium and event center look like, right? I mean, what kind of events should we have there, for example, and other things that maybe we haven't thought of as to how this will impact our community. How about bus service, for example? If we expect people to come downtown and to work downtown, how are we going to get people there that are going to take these jobs? So there are lots of facets to this. So I would just ask you to please do more than just come to this meeting. Sign on to this in terms of a search and discover experience, and let's work through this together.
If I may, I just want to add to that very quickly. I think something that would be very, very good to have would be patience and some discernment. So this is a long-term process that we're in of, I hadn't heard search and discovery, but I like that. That's good. And take the time with all the people up here who are not acting unethically to discover whether this is the right thing to move forward. There is a lot of work left to do. There are a lot of questions unanswered, and we know that. It's just the process that we're going through. And in terms of discernment, if people are saying that this is a $1 billion tax increase that we're shoving down everyone's throat, obviously that's not true. If you hear something that sounds pretty crazy, ask. And so we ask that that be done and that we work together on this. And ultimately, if the numbers don't work, then the numbers don't work. And we will take appropriate steps as we go along. There are a lot of things to be worked out, and we're here to do that. We wouldn't be having this meeting tonight if it weren't for the award from the state. So under the Tourism Act, that legislation, which is fairly new legislation, they awarded a portion of the state sales tax that is to be collected in the region of net new sales tax to be rebated back to our community for investment in these things. It's 13% award of what they will let us use in our own community. It prevents it from going up to the state coffers where they will spend it on whatever they want to spend it out of their general fund. So they agreed that this project, as proposed, is unique and extraordinary and meets the criteria, and they made that award. If they hadn't made that award, we wouldn't be sitting here. That was one of the tests in the award, the but-for tests. If not for that funding, would this go forward? The answer was no. So because they made that award in mid-December, then now we're going in a different direction. Okay, we got the award. Didn't know if we would get the award. All these people were working on, hey, let's make this application. Let's see if we could have the state rebate this money to us. The state said yes. That was in mid-December. We then had holidays and had to get a lot of things organized, and now it's mid-February, and we're having meetings every single month. So we are doing this with the public. We are walking with you as we figure this out. We couldn't even begin to have conversations about where we go from here until the state said okay, and they did, to the full amount. And I was there when they made that decision. I heard the commissioners, the economic development commissioners, discuss this. They had full faith in the project. In fact, they actually think that we'll realize more revenue than we're estimating, which will actually take, they think possibly, a couple of them thought maybe it would take a little more money out of the state's general fund, which they were concerned about. Of course, that would be great for us, but it won't work that way. So we're very excited that they had the faith in this, and we're very much looking forward to working with all of you going forward to vet the projects.
Okay, and recognizing that the Air Force Academy has not been approached on any questions, I did get one text since we've been sitting here. So, Carlos, would you come up and answer, how is it currently anticipated that the Air Force Academy Visitor Center will be procured? And then we'll go to feedback.
Great. Thank you. In short, what we anticipate is we'll develop the project. And then, much like we did with the indoor training facility, if you've seen that up in our cadet athletic area, we will approach both the USAFA Endowment, who is our fundraising activity that supports the academy, and we will also consider, as I mentioned earlier, issuing a request for interest for a public-private partnership. And our intent is to not use neither state nor local tax dollars or, frankly, federal funding for the facility. Our intent is to procure the facility using private funding in one of those two methods. Thank you.
Okay, realizing again what Commissioner Lathan said, this is a marathon, not a sprint. We'll have many more of these conversations. We'll now go into the feedback. I am going to ask everybody who has feedback, turn around and look behind you, if you would. Just look. You have a long line behind you. So what I'm going to ask is that everybody who comes to the mic, please be respectful that a lot of people want to speak. And I do have a timer, my mighty little timer, and I'm just going to keep track of that just to nudge you along if we feel like you might be a little long-winded. So, sir, you're up.
Thanks. This was actually intended as a question, but I guess I'll remove the question mark. This is regarding the two downtown venues. The Drake study will be released to the utility board, I believe, tomorrow.
Pull the mic up just so you
The Drake study will be released to the utility board tomorrow, I believe. I personally can't imagine a successful City for Champions occurring in the downtown venues in the shadow of the Drake plant. I'm watching the Drake study and I'm watching the C4C process. So I guess my question, or I don't know if it's a comment or question now, is how do you intend to integrate the Drake study and plan in the City for Champions planning process, particularly with respect to the social costs component, which is evaluated in the Drake study, visibility, tourism. The downtown Drake plant, which we used to refer to the olden days as a cloud factory, seems to me to have an adverse impact on the magnificence of the proposal you're presenting. So my question is, do you plan to work with the utility board to try to integrate those two large projects, which are both independently massive? So that is a question.
Okay, great. Come ahead, Mr. Bronco fan.
Well, I'm from Colorado Springs, and I don't know about a lot of people in here, but why can't you open up fiber optics as a sixth utility? Comcast is about to buy up Time Warner. And if that happens, they're going to be too big. Or maybe people don't know this, but utilities own everything that's underground. They own all the fiber optic lines. In my generation, it's important to have fast internet. We rely on it for our businesses. We rely on it with communication with the rest of the world. Mayor, you're looking for money-making ideas. Well, there you have it. Also, I'm actually for, you gentlemen up there said, we've always promoted ourselves out as sports medicine. Come here for medical reasons, come here to rehabilitate, come here for that. Why is everybody against the medical campus? To me, that probably makes the most sense. The Air Force Academy. As a kid growing up, we would take field trips there constantly. That's a brilliant one, by the way. The only thing that doesn't make sense to me is a 10,000-seat stadium. That's a little ambitious. Maybe I shouldn't get into that. If you guys really want to, Memorial Park is right across the street. Why can't you start doing summer Olympic events inside of Memorial Park? You know, Spring Spree is great and all, but if you want to show that you can fill 10,000 seats, why not use what we already have? And I'm sure the Olympic Training Center will get everyone they've got out there to participate. But anyhow, I think my whole point is I'm a little bit of both. Fiber optics as a sixth utility is important.
Great, thank you. I do too. That's cool.
Hello, I'd like to thank everybody that's been behind this project and the time invested and the leadership that you've shown in doing this project. I think it's a tremendous opportunity. It seems like you are approaching some very large donors to try to help support these projects, and I think there'd be an opportunity to reach out to general public on a very small donation, micro donation type of project. Consider something like a buy a brick type of program, and I would be very supportive of getting behind that.
Great, thank
you.
You'll kick it off?
Yes.
Good, I like that. Excellent.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for your efforts thus far. I have one idea. Mayor, I was just at an entrepreneurial meeting within the past 2 weeks. One of your chief economic development indicator or persons said, when asked about placing a new startup here, his response was, I don't think we have the infrastructure to support something like that. Extremely disappointing. So my idea is, why not become a venture capital entrepreneurial hub? That'll attract high-quality businesses, attract young people more than anything else. That's my comment, positive suggestion. Now, with regard to my main concern, it's about the Academy Visitor Center. As an alum, I have a vested interest in this. I've talked to General Lorenz at the foundation. There's no active project, so my concern is funding is one thing for construction. O&M, regular ongoing operations and maintenance, is another huge issue for a very unique situation. You talked about the Holiday Center. That's an existing athletic facility run under the Academy Athletic Foundation, a newly formed fundraising. That one's covered. The purpose of the Academy is to build character, leaders of character for the nation. It is not to be a tourist center. Now, it's great to have that as a byproduct, but I'm sure General Johnson will tell you in tight budgets, her number one concern is to educate cadets for service to our country. Now, if we can get a tangible byproduct and it's economically feasible, I'm all for it. But I do think there are a number of concerns about the funding, the eventual site selection. I think there's 4 on the table. Why not repurpose and upgrade the existing Goldwater Visitor Center, which has adequately served the Academy for a number of years in close proximity to two iconic situations, the Academy Chapel and the soon-to-be-completed Center for Character and Leadership Development. They were purposely designed to attract visitors to the cadet experience, help educate them about what it means to be a cadet and future service to the country. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I do want to see more activity and more study in those areas, but I do have some concerns. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Adam, and my question is actually for the business owners in and around that area. How does it make you feel to operate your business and welcome people into your place if the contaminants are that bad? Think about it.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. My name's Deborah Stout-Meininger. Some of you are familiar with me. And just two quick points I would like to make. One is that contamination area is not one block, not just 5 city blocks. It does cover both sides of the tracks, and the Walsh study in 2011 that had a study for the contaminants in 2008 did not delineate the boundaries of it. It only delineated some of the most contaminants around the building that was being demolished, which had nothing to do with anything other than asbestos. The contaminants are there from a building that was torn down and site that was torn down in the 1940s. That information is in the public archives at the public library. The other point of concern is the finances. Now, I know that we speak about general fund. Here's the general fund. Do not look what the other hand is doing. There is a lot of money that is being shifted around under the executive office. That there is no list of what's being spent. It's that, oh, this is not for public information. That's not. I wouldn't be so concerned if we didn't see things like, okay, one of the contributors, that there's no city funds towards the proposal, right? But at least one of the contributors towards that got $240,000 from the City of Colorado Springs, between utilities and the City of Colorado Springs. $75,000 went from them to the City of Champions proposal. In Chicago, where I come from back in the 70s, that was called money laundering. Out here, it's just business as usual.
I think that's a pretty serious
It is.
statement,
It is.
so
It's
we
a
will-
concern. It's a
we'll
very
make
great
sure
concern.
people have a chance to clarify any
Yes, and the executive office needs to
misinformation.
be more transparent, because the only thing they point to is the general fund that hypothetically city council has control over by permission of Bach, as he makes very clear. And everything else, including the Office of Emergency Management, has now been moved into the executive office. Bach has made very clear in many articles and many presentations that he delineates how many departments there are and what happens to those funds, and the city council does not. And so those are big concerns. There's a lot of money being moved around outside that general
Okay,
fund.
thank you.
And just saying no increase in taxes does not account for what's happening to the money outside of that.
There's a gentleman behind you that would like to speak now. Thank you.
I heard, thank you. I heard the term catalyst used at some point earlier in the conversation. And one of the things I am not at all familiar with the environmental issues that have been brought up here, but it seems to me that those have probably been laying dormant for quite some time. I see economic or commercial development oftentimes as a catalyst that helps move through many of those issues that are out there. And I would hope that maybe we would be looking at this as well, because those are obviously very important issues. The question I would have is maybe this could be that solution to helping resolve those down the road. So I would hope that would become a factor with that.
Thank you, sir. What I'd like to do now, and Councilmember King, I know you'd like to talk about something you have coming up, and as he's doing that, would you all think about, was there anything stated in the comment time that you feel needs clarified? So, okay, so we'll let Councilmember King first. President King.
Well, from all of us at Council, thank you very much for coming today. We appreciate the input. We are also going to hold a meeting at Council on the next Thursday, the 27th, from 6 to 8 in the evening. It'll be listening, and we will not be doing dialogue back and forth, but we did this on the marijuana issue, and that was just to have you come and speak to us and tell us what your thoughts are on the issue, and we'll be happy to listen to you on that particular issue. We have a lot of town hall meetings that we are all doing around the districts and around the city, so kind of be aware of those. You will be able to see those. They're in the paper, and all of us are doing individual ones. Council on February 3rd had a kind of a question and answer type of format for our council, and we asked about 10 to 15 legal opinions, I think was what we asked about, to get a feel for where we thought the council would play a role in this particular issue. And those legal opinions are in the final stages, and will be dispersed to council tomorrow or the next day at the latest. And we have scheduled in our work session some time next Monday for council to take a look at those legal opinions on the aspects of governance, finances, different aspects that we felt were concerned, so that we have an opportunity to totally vet those. So if you are interested, that's next Monday. We will have that on the agenda for our work session, and then we will start working through some of these questions that have been had and you've raised, and we will discuss those that we've had among ourselves next Monday. So if you want to come to that meeting, you can be aware of that also. And as you know, council is very diverse. Council has been had an opportunity to listen, and we also want to come together and try to say where we think we should be as a council, and try to speak with one voice to the community after we've heard from you, and have an opportunity to listen to you and be able to come up with where we think we will be on all these issues. So we look forward to the dialogue with you, and hope you can come, and especially on the 27th, we'll be listening. So please bring your opinions, and we'll be happy to take them in. Thank you very much.
Okay, anybody on the panel who would like to comment? I don't know if that will work, Governor. I think you might have to come up here again.
I think this is working. The next time we come, I'm going to have a sign-up sheet for people who want to do bricks in the plaza outside the museum. I think it's a great idea, and I can tell you, if you visit the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, you will see that the plaza there is totally paved with pavers that have the names of people I think did $100 as a contribution, and there are probably 5,000 or 6,000 of those paver bricks that were part of the community support. So that was a great idea. The Drake issue, Mayor and Council, look, 20 years from now or 30 years from now, there won't be a Drake. I mean, at some point or another, coal-fired plants are just going to go the way of history. That's a question of when. And even if tomorrow the decision were made to decommission Drake, it would take probably 8 to 10 years of transition. So we have to design something that, this will be the architect's challenge, not my challenge, believe me, but something that looks at the mountain and that doesn't look south at Drake, right? Something that gets people to pay attention to what's going on there, and perhaps begin to change the character of that sense of the southern part of downtown. Fiber optics is vital. I want Google Fiber in Colorado Springs, Mayor. We should get that to happen. But let me tell you, let's get Google in to help build these developments. This is the kind of thing that will excite those folks. And Arthur Clarke, if any of you are futurists, he had a wonderful book of essays he published in 1963. He said there are two reasons why we don't see the future clearly. First is a failure of nerve. We don't have the courage to look at the future. The second is a failure of imagination. We don't have the imagination to look at the future. This is a bold effort for a community that's been waiting for a bold effort. I mean, I wish I could infect you with the amount of confidence I have as somebody who came here from an outsider when I look and see what's going on. And people, Raven, your concerns are good concerns. Other people's concerns are good concerns. We shouldn't sell those short. But if we do this right, it is going to be unbelievable. Anyway, I'm preaching, sorry.
Can we get an amen? Anybody?
I think in the sake of full disclosure, Colorado Springs City Council manages our utility. I do not. I have no standing in terms of fiber optics, but the gentleman next to me does. So please talk to him.
Great. All right. I did receive other text messages from you. We will have those questions. We'll have answers at the next meeting, but we'll also have that online on our website. I do want to say thank you to the leaders who are coming forward, and you are bold. You are in the line of fire, and so thank you for that. I also want to say thank you to each and every one of you, because you care. That's pretty cool. No matter how you care, why you care, or what you do with that care, thank you. And do not, yes, I agree. And no matter how tough your question is, or how difficult your statement, or how wonderful it is, this group wants to hear it. There's no doubt about it. They want to hear it. And so thank you for being willing to put yourself out for that. And if we were the Oscars, our ratings would be high, because I have text messages from a lot of people saying thank you. Thank you for doing this. And so, again, I know it was the brainchild of you two, and I think that says a lot about our local government. So we'll be back with you in a month's time, March 18th, same time, right? Same time and same area. We're all here to talk about this if anybody needs to have further conversation. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I'm not here. I'm getting home.